The hum of industrial sewing machines became the soundtrack to the end of civilization. I stood in the center of the production floor at Meridian Textiles, watching my phone light up with emergency alerts, while bolts of premium denim sat stacked 20 feet high around me. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, twice, then stabilized, for now. Outside, sirens wailed in overlapping waves that made my teeth ache. My name is Carson Blake, and I'd been the operations manager at this facility for 6 years, 17,000 square feet of manufacturing space, 42 industrial machines, and enough raw fabric to clothe a small army. That morning, I'd been worried about meeting our fall collection deadline. By noon, I was barricading the loading dock doors with forklifts. The first infected person I saw wasn't some stranger on the news. It was Marcus Trent, our shipping coordinator. He'd left for lunch at 11:30, came back at 12:15 with his shirt torn open and something fundamentally wrong with the way he moved. His jaw hung slack, working up and down like he was trying to remember how to speak. Blood covered his hands, not his blood, I realized with creeping horror. The stairwell door slammed behind him as 3 more figures stumbled through, their movements jerky and purposeless yet somehow predatory. I hit the emergency lockdown button mounted near my office, a feature installed after a robbery attempt 2 years prior. Steel shutters groaned downward over the windows. Heavy magnetic locks engaged on every entrance with sequential thuds that I felt through the concrete floor. The infected Marcus lurched toward Jenny Holbrook, our pattern designer, who'd been standing near the cutting tables. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a 30-pound bolt of raw denim, and swung it like a baseball bat. The impact drove Marcus sideways into a shelving unit. Spools of thread rained down in a cascade of colors. "Back stairwell now," I shouted to the 7 other people still inside. Jenny scrambled toward the emergency exit. I could see others moving. Patrick from quality control, David and Ryan from the machine repair team, Tom from receiving, Sam who ran the screen printing station, and young Kevin, our newest hire who'd only been with us 3 weeks. The infected weren't fast, but they were relentless. One of them, a woman in a postal service uniform, clawed at the air between us, her fingernails leaving streaks on the metal work table as I herded everyone towards safety. We made it into the stairwell. The door was solid steel with a reinforced frame, designed to meet fire code requirements. I yanked it shut and engaged the deadbolt just as bodies thudded against the other side. The sound echoed in the narrow concrete shaft, wet, heavy impacts that spoke of complete disregard for pain or self-preservation. "What the hell is happening?" Patrick's voice cracked. He was 53, a Vietnam-era Navy veteran who'd seen his share of crisis, but this had shaken him to his core. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air in the stairwell. I pulled out my phone. The screen showed 23 missed calls, 14 text messages, and a presidential emergency alert that used words like quarantine and lethal force authorized. Video clips from downtown showed crowds of infected overwhelming police barricades. Traffic cameras captured highways transformed into parking lots of abandoned vehicles. One shaky cell phone video showed the National Guard setting up checkpoints at every bridge out of the city. "We're on the 3rd floor of a building surrounded by industrial parks and warehouses," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "The structure is solid. We have security measures, and we have resources that most people don't even know they need yet. If you've ever wondered what you'd do when the world stops making sense, watch what happens when survival becomes a production schedule. Hit that like button and subscribe. You'll want to see how manufacturing saves lives." The stairwell led to the roof access, the basement storage level, or back to the main production floor. Through the small wire-reinforced window in the door, I could see shapes moving between the sewing stations. At least 5 infected had made it inside before the lockdown completed. They wandered aimlessly, bumping into equipment, knocking over chairs, driven by instincts I couldn't begin to understand. "We can't stay in this stairwell," Sam said. He was 28, built like he spent serious time at the gym, with tattooed forearms and a surprisingly steady demeanor given the circumstances. No food, no water, no real defensible position if those things figure out how to open doors. He was right. The stairwell was a trap if we stayed too long. I looked at the group, 7 scared faces looking to me for direction. I'd managed production timelines, quality metrics, worker safety protocols. Nothing in my 6 years had prepared me for this, yet somehow the same skills applied. Assess resources, identify bottlenecks, develop a plan, execute. Basement level, I decided. The storage area has one entrance, no windows, reinforced walls designed to handle the weight of inventory above. We get down there, we secure that single entrance, and we take stock of what we have to work with. The descent took less than 30 seconds. Each footstep clanged on the metal stairs, sounds that seemed impossibly loud. My hand left sweat prints on the steel railing. At the basement level, I eased the door open, checking the dimly lit space beyond. Rows of industrial shelving stretched back into shadows. Pallets of fabric rolls stood wrapped in plastic. Cardboard boxes of zippers, buttons, thread, and notions filled every available space. The air smelled of cotton, sizing chemicals, and the particular mustiness of a below-ground storage area. Empty, no infected, no threats visible. We filed in quickly, and I secured the door behind us. This lock was even better than the one upstairs, a commercial-grade deadbolt with a steel crossbar that dropped into reinforced mounting points. Someone could beat on this door for hours without making progress. Okay, I said, flipping on the overhead lights. The basement illuminated in sections as fluorescent tubes flickered to life. Okay, we need to think clearly. Does anyone have injuries? Bites? Scratches? Any contact with blood? Everyone checked themselves and each other. 7 heads shook in the negative. That was our first piece of good news, maybe our only piece of good news. Tom, a stocky guy in his 40s with prematurely gray hair, pointed toward the back corner. Break room supplies are stored over there. Coffee. Probably some vending machine snacks. There's a utility sink with running water. Patrick was already moving, taking inventory with the methodical precision of someone who'd survived by staying organized. We've got maybe 3 days of food if we ration carefully. Water's not an issue as long as utilities stay on. After that, we need a plan beyond hiding in a basement, David finished. He was our senior machine technician, 36 years old, with the kind of technical knowledge that made him invaluable on the production floor. His hands were shaking slightly, but his eyes were sharp, already scanning the environment for solutions. I walked to the utility sink and splashed cold water on my face, trying to shock my brain into higher gear. The water ran clear and cold, system still functioning. Through the ceiling I could hear muffled thuds and dragging sounds as the infected wandered the production floor above us. Each sound made my shoulders tense. Think, Carson. Think like a manager. What resources do we have? I turned to face the group. We're sitting in the raw materials depot for a mid-sized clothing manufacturer. We have industrial-grade fabrics. Denim, canvas, ripstop nylon, leather scraps. We have tools. Cutting equipment, heavy-duty needles, industrial thread strong enough to sew through multiple layers. We have machines upstairs, if we can reclaim that space. We have knowledge. Everyone here knows garment construction, pattern making, industrial production. Kevin, barely 22 years old with nervous energy radiating off him, spoke up. You're talking about making what? Zombie-proof clothing? I'm talking about making gear that helps people survive, I corrected. Look at what just happened upstairs. Marcus grabbed at Jenny. His fingers caught fabric, not skin, because she was wearing long sleeves. Those things bite. The videos show that clearly. But teeth and nails have to penetrate to cause harm. What if we made clothing that's harder to bite through? Backpacks to carry supplies. Protective gear that actually matters in this new world. Ryan, David's assistant technician, was a thin guy with wire-rimmed glasses that had gotten bent in our escape. He straightened them absently as he spoke. Heavy denim resists abrasion. We've got 12-ounce, 14-ounce, even 16-ounce denim in stock. That's thick enough that human bite force wouldn't easily penetrate. Layer it, reinforce stress points, and you've got something that might actually save lives. Sam nodded slowly. I've seen bite force data. Human average is around 160 pounds per square inch. If those things retain human jaw strength, multiple layers of heavy canvas or denim would provide significant resistance, especially if we add padding at likely bite locations, forearms, shoulders, neck area. Patrick had moved to a laptop workstation near the inventory control desk. The computer was still running, still connected to the internet somehow. He pulled up news feeds and we gathered around the screen. What we saw made my stomach drop. The outbreak had started 18 hours ago in 3 simultaneous locations: downtown district, the airport, and the port facility. Epidemiologists on the news were using words like unprecedented transmission rate and complete systemic collapse. Military units had established a perimeter around the city. Nothing was getting in or out. The governor was on screen, face pale and drawn, announcing that the entire metropolitan area was under quarantine indefinitely. "We're trapped," Jenny whispered. She'd been mostly silent since the escape, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. "They've sealed us in with those things. They've contained the outbreak," I countered, though the distinction felt hollow, which means everyone inside this containment zone is now living in a new reality. Society hasn't collapsed. It's been forced to adapt. And adaptation requires resources. I pulled up the facility's inventory database on the computer. The numbers materialized in neat columns. Our complete stock of raw materials, work-in-progress items, finished goods awaiting shipment. Thousands of yards of fabric in dozens of varieties. Industrial supplies rated for heavy manufacturing use. Pattern templates for hundreds of garment styles. Before the outbreak, we were making fashion pieces. Jeans, jackets, designer bags, I said, scrolling through the data. Mass production for retail chains. But this facility has the capacity to produce 500 garments per day at full operation. We've got enough raw materials for months of production. And now we're going to make things that matter. Gear that keeps people alive. Tom scratched his jaw, where gray stubble was already showing after the morning's missed shave. Assuming we can retake the production floor from whatever's up there. Assuming the power stays on. Assuming we can find people who actually need what we're making. That's a lot of assumptions, boss. Every plan requires assumptions, I replied. But consider our alternatives. We can hide down here until food runs out, then try to escape into a city full of infected. Or we can leverage what we have. Secure facility, manufacturing equipment, raw materials, and specialized knowledge. We turn this factory into something valuable, something people will need. The conversation stretched into the evening. We rationed out granola bars and bottled water from the break room supplies. Kevin found a battery-powered radio that picked up emergency broadcasts, mostly repeating information we already knew, interspersed with increasingly desperate messages from people trapped in various locations. The authorities were broadcasting instructions to shelter in place, avoid contact with infected individuals, and wait for organized rescue operations that seemed perpetually in progress. Night fell. The basement had no windows, so the only change was the gradual dimming of natural light that had been filtering down the stairwell from the rooftop access. We left the overhead lights on. Nobody wanted darkness right now. The sounds from above had decreased, but not stopped entirely. Occasional bumps and scrapes reminded us that the infected were still up there, still wandering, still waiting. Patrick took first watch at the door, sitting with a length of steel pipe we'd found near the maintenance supplies. The rest of us tried to rest, though actual sleep seemed impossible. I lay on a flattened cardboard box, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through production calculations. If we could clear the facility, what would we make first? How would we distribute it? Who would we trade with? Sam settled down nearby, his back against a pallet of canvas. You really think we can pull this off? Turn a clothing factory into some kind of survival gear operation? I think we don't have a choice, I answered quietly. The world outside has changed permanently. Money might not matter anymore. Fashion certainly doesn't. But everyone still needs clothing. Everyone needs bags to carry supplies. Everyone needs protection. We're sitting on a resource that's going to be incredibly valuable. We just need to survive long enough to make use of it. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "My dad was a Marine. He used to say that in combat you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of training. We're trained to make clothing, so that's what we do. We just make different clothing now." The philosophy was sound, even if it couldn't push away the fear that sat heavy in my chest. I'd been responsible for production metrics and shipping schedules. Now I was responsible for keeping 7 people alive in a world that had turned predatory. The weight of it pressed down like physical force. Hour 3 of darkness. I'd started counting after midnight. Kevin woke up screaming. The sound cut through the basement like a siren, and everyone jolted awake, hands scrambling for makeshift weapons. Patrick was on his feet instantly, pipe raised. "Nightmare," Kevin gasped, his face slick with sweat. I'm sorry. I was back upstairs and they were everywhere and—" "It's okay," Jenny said, surprising me. She moved to sit beside him, her voice steady despite her own obvious fear. "We're all scared. We're all seeing it when we close our eyes." The moment passed, but sleep became even more elusive after that. We sat in small groups talking in low voices, sharing stories about our lives before this morning, a morning that already felt impossibly distant. Patrick had 3 grown children who lived across the country. Tom had season tickets to the baseball games he'd never see again. David talked about the motorcycle he'd been restoring in his garage, a project that would likely remain forever unfinished. I thought about my apartment across town, a 1-bedroom place with furniture I'd been meaning to replace, and a refrigerator full of food that would be rotting by now. I'd had plans, a vacation request pending for next month, a date scheduled for Friday with someone I'd met at a coffee shop. All of it erased in the space of a few hours, but dwelling on loss was a luxury we couldn't afford. I forced my mind back to practical matters, production planning, resource allocation, survival logistics. As dawn approached, or what I assumed was dawn based on my watch, I gathered everyone together near the computer workstation. Patrick looked exhausted from his night watch shifts. Sam had dark circles under his eyes, but we were alive, uninjured, and thinking clearly. That put us ahead of most people outside these walls. "We need to retake the production floor," I said without preamble. "Today. Right now, we're just hiding. We need to transition from refugees to residents. This facility becomes our fortress, our workshop, and our livelihood." David leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "There are at least 5 of those things up there. Maybe more. How do we clear them out without getting torn apart? We use the environment to our advantage. The production floor has multiple sections we can isolate, fire doors between areas, heavy equipment we can use as barriers or weapons. And we have something those things don't, the ability to plan, to coordinate, to use tools." Ryan was nodding, his technical mind already working through the problem. "The machines themselves are heavy. 500 pounds or more for the industrial sewers. We could use forklifts to create corridors, funnel them into kill zones where we can deal with them 1 or 2 at a time." "Kill zones," Jenny repeated, her voice hollow. "We're talking about killing people, or things that used to be people. We're talking about survival," Patrick said flatly. His military background was showing now, the calm pragmatism of someone trained to make hard decisions. "Those things upstairs will kill us without hesitation or remorse. They're not people anymore. They're threats that need to be neutralized." The word hung in the air. Neutralized. Clinical. Necessary. I pulled up the facility layout on the computer. a CAD drawing showing the floor plan in precise detail. The main production floor is essentially one large room with support columns every 30 feet. There are 3 fire doors that divide it into sections. Cutting and preparation area here, sewing stations in the middle, finishing and packaging at the far end. The stairwell door opens into the middle section. So we open the door, assess how many infected are in that immediate area, then engage them in a controlled manner, Sam said. Use reach weapons, pipes, poles, anything that keeps distance between us and them. We clear the middle section first, then work outward. 1. Tom looked skeptical. And if there are too many? If we open that door and 10 of them come pouring through? Then we close it again and revise the plan, I answered. But we can't stay in this basement indefinitely. We have maybe 2 more days of food. Eventually, we either reclaim the facility or we abandon it. I vote we reclaim it. The vote was unanimous, though I could see the fear in every face. We spent the next hour preparing. Makeshift weapons assembled from whatever we could find. Steel pipes from the shelving units, a pair of bolt cutters that could serve as crude pincers, some heavy wrenches from the maintenance supplies. We fashioned crude protective gear from boxes and duct tape, wrapping our forearms and improvising shin guards. It looked ridiculous, but it might deflect a bite or a scratch. Patrick and Sam would go first. Patrick with his military experience, and Sam with his size and strength. David and I would follow, with Ryan providing backup. Tom, Jenny, and Kevin would stay in the stairwell, ready to slam the door shut if things went badly. We climbed the stairs in silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. The steel pipe in my hands felt simultaneously too heavy and too light, a clumsy weapon against a threat I barely understood. At the 3rd floor landing, Patrick positioned himself beside the door, ear pressed against the metal. I hear movement, he whispered. Shuffling. Something dragging. Maybe 2 or 3 of them close to the door. I looked at Sam, at David, at Ryan. Saw my own fear reflected back at me, mixed with determination. We'd made our choice. Now we had to execute. On 3, Patrick said quietly, his hand on the deadbolt. 1, 2, 3. The door swung open. The stench hit first, a smell of decay and something else, something organic and wrong. The middle section of the production floor was dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting everything in greenish shadows. 3 infected stood 20 feet away, their backs to us, swaying slightly as if hearing music we couldn't detect. 1 wore the remains of a security uniform. Another was in business casual, khakis and a polo shirt, both soaked with dark stains. The 3rd was harder to identify, its clothing torn beyond recognition. They turned at the sound of the door. Their movements were jerky, uncoordinated, but their focus was immediate and complete. Milky eyes locked onto us. Jaws dropped open, revealing teeth stained with things I didn't want to identify. A low moan started, building in volume, a sound that raised every hair on my neck. Patrick moved first. He stepped through the doorway, pipe held in a 2-handed grip, and advanced toward the nearest infected, the security guard. Sam flanked right, creating a 2-person front. David and I followed, spreading out to avoid bunching up. The infected guard lurched forward with surprising speed. Patrick sidestepped, letting momentum carry the thing past him, then brought the pipe down hard on the back of its skull. The impact made a sound like a baseball hitting concrete, a flat, wet crack that I felt in my teeth. The infected dropped, twitched once, and went still. The business casual infected was on Sam. He shoved it back with his pipe, maintaining distance, then thrust forward, catching it in the chest. It stumbled but didn't fall. Sam swore and swung horizontally, connecting with its temple. This one took 2 more hits before it collapsed. The 3rd one came for me. I backpedaled, nearly tripping over a rolling chair, my pipe coming up defensively. The infected's hands clawed at the air between us, fingers curled into rigid talons. Its face was a mask of dried blood and vacant hunger. I swung, missed, swung again. The pipe connected with its shoulder, spinning it sideways. David moved in from the side and delivered a crushing blow to its head. It went down hard. Silence, except for our ragged breathing. 3 bodies on the floor. 3 former people, now just obstacles to step around. I felt bile rising in my throat but forced it down. This was the new reality. This was survival. "Clear," Patrick said, his voice steady despite the violence. 3 down. How many more did we see come through during the initial breach? At least 2 others, I answered, scanning the shadows between sewing stations. The production floor was a maze of equipment, work tables, and inventory. Dozens of places to hide. Dozens of blind corners. We need to move carefully, check every section. We advanced in formation, Patrick and Sam leading, the rest of us covering angles. The cutting area was clear, no infected among the massive fabric cutting tables and industrial shears. The pattern-making section was empty. We found 1 infected trapped behind a toppled shelving unit, unable to figure out how to climb over the obstacle. It reached for us helplessly as Patrick ended it with mechanical efficiency. The 5th infected was near the loading dock doors, clawing at the steel shutters, trying to get out, or maybe trying to get at sounds from outside. Sam and Patrick handled it together, a coordinated attack that was over in seconds. Then we waited, weapons ready, listening for any other movement. Minutes stretched, the emergency lighting hummed. Ventilation systems pushed air through overhead ducts, but no more infected appeared. "I think that's it," David said quietly. "I think we actually cleared it." The relief was overwhelming but temporary. We'd reclaimed the production floor, but we'd also just killed 5 people, or 5 things that used to be people. The distinction didn't make it easier. I looked at my hands, saw them shaking, saw spots of blood on my sleeves from spatter. Jenny, Tom, and Kevin emerged from the stairwell cautiously. Kevin went pale at the sight of the bodies, turning away quickly. Jenny pressed her lips into a thin line but kept moving, joining us in the cleared space. "We need to deal with these," Tom said, gesturing at the bodies. "Can't leave them here. Disease risk, psychological impact. We need them gone." The loading dock had a service elevator that descended to a ground-level bay. We used furniture dollies to move the bodies, trying not to look too closely at their faces. The bay door was sealed by the security shutters, but there was a personnel exit with a reinforced door and a small window. Through the window, I could see the parking lot and the industrial park beyond. Movement everywhere, dozens of infected wandering between buildings. Some clustered around vehicles, others moved in aimless patterns. The parking lot that had been full of employee cars this morning was now a hunting ground. "We're not going out there," Patrick stated unnecessarily. "Not yet. Maybe not for a long time." We sealed the ground floor access and returned to the production area. The 3rd floor suddenly felt like a castle keep, defensible, supplied, isolated from the chaos below. We'd reclaimed our fortress. Now we needed to put it to use. The first prototype took us 6 hours to design and construct. We gathered around cutting table number 3, where Jenny had spread out patterns and measurements while Ryan sketched modifications on graph paper. The concept was simple. Transform a standard denim jacket into something that could protect against bites without becoming too heavy or restrictive. 16-ounce denim for the base layer, Jenny said, pointing to the bolt of heavy fabric David had rolled over from storage. That's typically used for work pants, industrial applications where abrasion resistance matters. It's tough enough that penetration would be extremely difficult. Sam held up a sample piece, testing its thickness between his fingers. "We layer this over a padding substrate, maybe canvas batting or foam, at the forearms, shoulders, and collar. Those are the grab points where an infected would most likely make contact." I watched them work, feeling a strange sense of purpose settling over the group. Yesterday, we'd been manufacturing fashion items for department stores. Today, we were engineering survival equipment. The shift was jarring, yet somehow it made sense. Humanity had always adapted its tools to match its environment. Our environment had simply changed faster than anyone could have imagined. Patrick had taken over the computer workstation, monitoring news feeds and emergency broadcasts. Every few minutes, he'd call out updates. The military had established field hospitals at the quarantine perimeter. The National Guard was dropping supply packages in designated safe zones. Survivor groups were being advised to maintain defensive positions and await organized rescue operations. Organized rescue, Patrick muttered. They're talking like this is temporary, like in a few weeks things will go back to normal. Maybe they will, Kevin offered hopefully. He'd regained some color after leaving the body disposal to others, and now he was organizing thread spools by color and weight, busy work that kept his hands occupied and his mind focused. And maybe they won't, I said, watching Jenny cut through the heavy denim with industrial shears. Either way, we prepare for the worst and hope for the best. That's the only rational approach. The prototype jacket took shape over the afternoon. Double-layered sleeves with reinforced stitching, a high collar that could be fastened to protect the neck, padding at key locations that added bulk but potentially critical protection. When Jenny finally held up the finished product, it looked more like medieval armor than modern clothing. Crude, heavy, functional. Someone needs to test it, she said, looking around the group. Sam volunteered. He shrugged into the jacket, moving his arms experimentally. The fabric was stiff, restricting his range of motion somewhat, but not prohibitively. It's heavy, he admitted. Maybe 4 pounds heavier than a regular jacket. But I can move. I can work in this. Can it stop a bite? Tom asked the critical question. We needed to test the concept, but none of us wanted to volunteer for an actual bite test. Instead, Ryan improvised. He used a C-clamp with rubber-tipped jaws to simulate bite pressure, clamping down on the layered fabric with increasing force. The material compressed but didn't tear. The padding beneath distributed the pressure. Even at what we estimated was maximum human bite force, the fabric held. It's not perfect, David observed. A sustained attack, multiple bites in the same location. Eventually it would fail. But for a single encounter, a grab situation, this could mean the difference between infection and escape. I felt something clicking into place in my mind, the production manager's instinct recognizing a viable product. We can make these. We have the materials, the equipment, the knowledge. Question is, who are we making them for? The answer came 3 days later. We'd spent those days establishing routine. Watches rotated every 4 hours, someone always monitoring the doors, the windows, the security feeds from cameras that still functioned around the facility's perimeter. Meals rationed carefully from our limited supplies. Production work filling the daylight hours. We'd manufactured 8 protective jackets, a dozen reinforced pants, and 4 heavy-duty backpacks made from canvas and leather. The power had flickered twice but remained on. Water still flowed from the taps. We were living in a bubble of functionality while the world outside deteriorated. Through the 3rd-floor windows, we watched the industrial park descend into chaos. Fires burned in 2 buildings across the street. Infected wandered in growing numbers. Once, we saw a group of survivors running between warehouses pursued by a mob of the things. We couldn't help. We could only watch. Then, on day 4, someone knocked on our loading dock door. The sound was unmistakable. 3 heavy impacts, metal on metal, deliberate and spaced. Not the mindless clawing of infected, but the intentional communication of someone still human. Patrick was on watch. He checked the camera feed, then called me over urgently. We've got people, 5 of them. They look alive, aware, armed. I studied the grainy security footage. 5 men standing at the loading dock entrance, looking up at the camera. One of them was waving, making exaggerated gestures toward the door. They carried backpacks and weapons. Actual weapons, including what looked like 2 rifles and several handguns. Their clothing was torn and stained, but their movements were coordinated and purposeful. Could be dangerous, Tom warned. Could be looters, raiders, who knows what. We open that door, we're exposed. Could also be potential allies, I countered. Or customers, if we're thinking about this as a manufacturing operation. Either way, we can't hide in here forever pretending we're alone in the world. Sam checked his protective jacket, making sure it was fastened properly. We talked to them through the door first. Assess intentions before we commit to anything. There was an intercom system for the loading dock, a speaker mounted outside and a handset inside. I picked up the handset, pressed the talk button, and heard the click of the connection engaging. "This is Carson Blake, operations manager for this facility," I said, my voice sounding strange and formal through the speaker. "Identify yourselves and state your business." A pause. Then a voice came through. Male, probably mid-30s with a slight southern accent. "My name is Marcus Wade, not the Marcus who worked here. Different guy. These are members of my group. We're holed up in a warehouse about half a mile east. We've been watching your building, saw lights at night, figured someone was alive in there. We're looking to trade." Trade. The word carried weight. Implied structure suggested an emerging economy even in the midst of collapse. "Trade what?" I asked. "We've got food, water, medical supplies, ammunition," Marcus Wade replied. "We hit a National Guard supply drop before the infected converged on it. Grabbed what we could. But we need gear bags to carry supplies, clothing that offers protection, anything that improves our survival odds. We heard this was a clothing factory. Figured it was worth checking." I looked at the others. Patrick gave a cautious nod. Jenny looked uncertain. Sam shrugged, a gesture that said the decision was mine to make. "We have protective gear," I said into the intercom. "Custom-made items designed specifically for this situation, but we're not opening the main doors. Too much risk. There's a personnel entrance on the north side of the building, 2nd floor. Fire escape access. You approach from that side, you can see the door. We'll meet you there. Negotiate through the doorway." "Fair enough," Marcus agreed. "Give us 5 minutes to reposition." We moved quickly, gathering samples of our manufactured items and heading to the north side personnel door. This entrance was steel reinforced with a narrow window and a speaking vent. Through the window, I watched the 5 men approach up the fire escape stairs. They moved tactically, covering each other, watching their surroundings. Whatever these people were, they'd learned fast about staying alive. Marcus Wade was the one who stepped forward. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair buzzed military short and a face that carried fresh scars, one across his left cheek, another on his forehead. He wore jeans and a leather jacket that looked like it had been through hell. The rifle slung across his back was an AR-15, and he carried it with the casual familiarity of someone who'd done more than just shoot at paper targets. "Carson Blake?" he asked through the speaking vent. "That's me," I confirmed. "Show me what you've got to trade." One of Marcus's companions, a stocky Asian man with glasses and a serious expression, opened a backpack. Inside, I could see MRE packages, bottled water, boxes of ammunition, and what looked like basic medical supplies. "Real value in the current economy. We've got enough food and water to keep 20 people alive for 2 weeks, Marcus said. "We've got ammunition for common calibers. We've got first aid supplies, including antibiotics we pulled from a pharmacy. And we've got information. Locations of supply drops, infected concentration areas, which routes are still passable. What we don't have is gear. Bags to carry this stuff, clothing that protects us when we have to move through dangerous areas. That's what we need." I held up one of our protective jackets, letting him see it through the window. Heavy denim construction, reinforced at key bite points, padded to distribute pressure. We've tested it against simulated bite force. It won't make you invulnerable, but it'll give you a fighting chance if something grabs you. Marcus studied the jacket with clear interest. What's the trade value? And there it was, the question that would define our new economy. What was a protective jacket worth? How many meals? How much ammunition? I was making up an entire price structure in real time. One jacket for 20 MREs, I said, picking a number that felt reasonable. One pair of reinforced pants for 15 MREs, a heavy-duty backpack for 30 MREs or equivalent value in medical supplies. Marcus considered, then nodded slowly. That's steep, but fair given the circumstances. I'll take 3 jackets, 2 backpacks. I can give you 60 MREs, 20 bottles of water, and a box of 9mm ammunition. 50 rounds. The negotiation continued for another 10 minutes. We settled on terms. Then came the logistical challenge. How to exchange goods without opening the door wide enough for infected to get through or for Marcus's group to force entry. The solution was a pass-through system. We cracked the door open 6 inches, chained it in place so it couldn't open further, and handed items through one at a time. Marcus's people passed over supplies. We handed back manufactured gear. The whole exchange took 15 minutes, both groups watching nervously for any sign of infected attracted by the activity. When it was done, Marcus stood on the fire escape landing, examining the jacket he'd received. He looked up at me through the window. You keep making these, I'll keep bringing trade goods. I know 4 other survivor groups that would deal with you. There's a whole network forming, people who got lucky, who found defensible positions, who are trying to organize. You've got something valuable here. Protect it. He descended the fire escape with his group, and we sealed the door behind them. When I turned around, everyone was staring at the pile of supplies we'd just acquired. Food that would extend our survival by weeks, water that removed immediate pressure, ammunition that could defend the facility if necessary. We just traded clothing for food, Jenny said wonderingly, like we stepped back 1,000 years to bartering economies. We just proved the concept, I corrected. This facility isn't just our shelter, it's our production center, our trading post, our economic engine. We manufacture value, we trade for necessities, we build relationships with other survivor groups. That's how we survive long-term. You're watching the birth of a new economy built on survival instead of currency. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about what you'd trade for in this situation. You'll want to see how this manufacturing operation grows into something bigger. Over the next 2 months, the factory transformed from a refuge into a thriving production center. Marcus Wade became our primary trading partner, visiting every 5 to 7 days with different goods and increasingly specific requests. Other survivor groups started making contact, some through Marcus's referrals, others who'd simply observed activity at our facility and approached cautiously. We established a reputation, the factory that made protective gear, the textile operation that still functioned when everything else had fallen apart. Demand for our products exceeded our production capacity, which was limited by our small workforce and the need to maintain constant security. That's when I made the decision to recruit. The first recruit arrived on day 47. Her name was Derek Chen, which I only learned after he'd proven himself trustworthy. Initially, he was just a voice on the intercom claiming to have industrial sewing experience and asking for sanctuary. Derek was 31, slight build, with nervous hands that never stopped moving. He'd worked in a competing textile facility across town before the outbreak. He'd survived by hiding in a supply closet for 3 days, then made a harrowing journey through infested streets to reach the industrial park. We interviewed him through the door, verified his knowledge with technical questions about machine operation and garment construction, then carefully admitted him after a thorough inspection to ensure he had no bites or injuries. Derek wept with relief when he stepped into the secured facility, then got to work within an hour. His machine skills were excellent, and his production speed doubled our jacket output immediately. 3 more survivors joined us over the following weeks. Angela Martinez had been a seamstress at a bridal shop. She brought refined finishing skills that improved our product quality. Robert Bear Thompson was a former Army quartermaster who understood logistics and supply chain management better than anyone I'd ever met. Timothy Vaughn was only 19, but he'd worked in his family's upholstery business and could sew leather better than anyone else in the facility. Our workforce grew to 12. Production increased to 20 garments per day. The variety expanded. We started manufacturing bite-resistant gloves, reinforced boots with steel toe inserts, tactical vests with load-bearing capabilities, and specialized bags for different purposes. The second floor, which had been largely unused before the outbreak, became our residential area. We converted office spaces into sleeping quarters, established a communal kitchen using hot plates and supplies from the break room, created a schedule that balanced production work with security watches and maintenance duties. Patrick took charge of defense planning. He established overlapping watch positions, created contingency plans for various breach scenarios, and trained everyone in basic defensive tactics using makeshift weapons. We'd been lucky so far. The infected seemed to lack the cognitive ability to figure out how to access upper floors when ground-level entrances were sealed. But luck wasn't a strategy, and Patrick made sure we were prepared for the day our luck ran out. Sam became our head of quality control, testing every item we produced to ensure it met protective standards. He developed increasingly sophisticated testing protocols, including a bite simulator he constructed using hydraulic clamps and pressure gauges. Any item that failed testing was deconstructed, analyzed for weaknesses, and redesigned. I found myself becoming something I'd never expected, a CEO in an economy that operated on barter instead of currency, managing production schedules, negotiating trades, making strategic decisions about what products to prioritize, which survivor groups to partner with, how to allocate resources. The skills I'd developed managing a conventional factory translated surprisingly well to this post-apocalyptic manufacturing operation. By month 3, we were trading with 7 regular survivor groups and had contact with a dozen others. Our network extended across the quarantine zone. Intelligence flowed along with trade goods, information about infected concentrations, locations of useful supplies, which areas were relatively safe for travel, which groups were trustworthy, and which were dangerous. That last category became increasingly relevant as the initial shock of the outbreak faded and human nature reasserted itself. Not all survivor groups were interested in cooperative trading. Some preferred taking by force what they couldn't acquire through negotiation. The first raid attempt came on day 83. It was 2 in the morning when the alarm sounded. A simple system we'd rigged using motion sensors and bells. Patrick was on watch and spotted them immediately through the security cameras. 8 men approaching the building from multiple directions, all carrying weapons, moving with coordinated purpose. "We've got hostiles," Patrick announced, his voice cutting through the sleeping areas. "Armed group, tactical approach. Looks like they're planning forced entry." Everyone mobilized instantly. We drilled for this scenario dozens of times, defensive positions taken at key access points, weapons distributed. We'd accumulated a modest arsenal through trades, including several firearms and ample ammunition. I grabbed a rifle I'd been training with and moved to the north side position overlooking the fire escape. Through the window, I could see 3 of the raiders positioning themselves at the fire escape entrance. They were trying to force the door with a pry bar, working quietly, clearly hoping to breach before we could respond. One of them looked up and saw me in the window. For a moment, we made eye contact. Then he raised his weapon, a shotgun, and I ducked back as the window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the floor. The blast was deafening in the enclosed space. My ears rang as I crawled to a different position, trying to get an angle on the raiders without exposing myself to direct fire. "North side is hot," I shouted. "They're armed and shooting." Patrick's voice came from across the facility. "East side attempting breach with a vehicle. They're ramming the loading dock shutters." The sound of metal screaming against metal echoed through the building. The entire structure shook with the impact. The raiders were trying to smash through our defenses with brute force. Sam appeared beside me, moving in a crouch. We need to repel them fast, before they breach. Show them the cost is too high. He was right. If the raiders broke through, we'd be fighting room to room against people who'd already demonstrated willingness to kill. Our only advantage was the defensive position. We had to leverage it. I rose quickly, just high enough to aim through the shattered window, and fired 3 shots toward the fire escape. I wasn't trying to kill. I was trying to discourage, to make them reconsider whether the factory was worth the cost. The shots sparked off metal railing. The raiders scattered, taking cover. The ramming at the loading dock continued. Crash, crash, crash. The shutters were buckling. I could hear it in the tortured sound of bending metal. If they broke through, Timothy, Derek, get to the loading dock area, I ordered. Set up a crossfire position. If they breach, make them pay for every foot they advance. Another shotgun blast from outside, this time aimed at a different window. The raiders were probing for weak points, trying to find a way in. David was at the south window firing controlled bursts from a hunting rifle he'd acquired through trade. Bear was at the west position, holding fire but ready to respond if raiders appeared from that direction. The vehicle ramming stopped abruptly. For a moment there was eerie silence except for the ringing in my ears. Then I heard voices outside, shouting, arguing. The raiders were reassessing, calculating whether the resistance was worth continuing. Patrick's military experience showed as he called out, "They're regrouping. Prepare for either a final push or withdrawal. Stay sharp." I chanced another look through the window. The 3 raiders at the fire escape were retreating, moving back down the stairs in tactical formation. At the loading dock, I could hear the vehicle's engine, a heavy truck by the sound of it, revving up and then fading as it drove away. They were leaving. We'd held. The next 20 minutes were tense as we maintained defensive positions, watching for any sign of renewed attack. But the raiders had apparently decided the factory wasn't worth the cost. We'd made our point. We were armed, trained, and willing to defend what was ours. When dawn broke and we finally stood down from alert status, the damage assessment was sobering. 3 windows shattered. The loading dock shutters severely damaged, bent inward and no longer completely secure. Bullet holes scarred the interior walls. We'd expended over 50 rounds of ammunition, a significant portion of our defensive supplies. But we'd survived. We'd defended our position. Word would spread through the survivor network. The factory was defended, fortified, not an easy target. "We need better defenses," Patrick said flatly as we surveyed the damage. That was a probing attack. Next time they'll come with more people and better preparation. We got lucky. He was right, but improved defenses required resources we were already struggling to maintain. Every trade we made was a careful balance, acquiring food and supplies while preserving enough manufactured goods to maintain trading relationships. We were perpetually one bad week away from serious shortages. The solution came from an unexpected source. 2 days after the raid, Marcus Wade arrived with a proposal. He brought 3 other group leaders with him, representatives from survivor communities that had been trading with us regularly. They stood on the fire escape while we conducted the meeting through the repaired window, and Marcus laid out his proposal. "You're producing gear that everyone needs," he said. "You're defended but vulnerable. You're a valuable asset to the entire survivor network in this zone. We want to formalize relationships, establish a cooperative agreement. We provide security support, raw material acquisition, food supplies. You provide manufactured goods at preferential rates to the coalition members. We protect each other, trade fairly, build something that lasts beyond just day-to-day survival." It was the closest thing to government I'd heard proposed since the outbreak. A coalition of survivor groups with mutual defense agreements and economic cooperation. Risky, because it meant depending on others, but potentially transformative if it worked. I looked at my people, Patrick, Sam, David, all the others who'd helped build this operation, saw calculated consideration in their faces. They were thinking the same thing I was. We could continue alone, isolated and vulnerable, or we could integrate into a larger structure with shared resources and risks. What are the terms? I asked Marcus. The negotiation took 3 hours. We hammered out details, security patrols around the factory, scheduled supply deliveries, production quotas for coalition gear, trading protocols, dispute resolution procedures. It was like drafting a business contract for a world where written contracts no longer had legal meaning, where the only enforcement was mutual benefit and collective survival. In the end, we agreed. The factory became part of the coalition, not subordinate, but integrated. An economic engine providing manufactured goods in exchange for resources and protection. The world's being rebuilt one trade agreement at a time, and you're watching history get written in real time. Drop a like if you're still with me, and share this with someone who needs to hear how communities survive when everything falls apart. The coalition transformed operations immediately. Within a week, we had regular security patrols, coalition members who rotated through defensive positions around the factory's perimeter. Supply runs became organized expeditions with multiple groups contributing people and receiving shared benefits. Intelligence sharing improved dramatically, giving us real-time information about infected movements and hazardous areas. Production expanded to meet coalition demands. We were manufacturing 50 garments per day by month 4, with every item spoken for before it was completed. The second floor became entirely residential as we recruited more workers, people with relevant skills who were vetted by coalition members before being allowed to join. Jenny took over design and pattern making, developing new products based on feedback from field users. She created modular vest systems that allowed users to add or remove protective panels depending on threat level. She designed child-sized protective gear after coalition members requested items for younger survivors. Every innovation made the operation more valuable, more essential to the growing network of survivor communities. By month 6, we were trading beyond the coalition. Word had spread even through the quarantine perimeter. Military units at the border were placing orders through intermediaries, requesting specialized gear for soldiers conducting operations in heavily infected areas. We'd become significant enough that even the official response forces recognized our value. The factory was now housing 32 people. The entire building had been converted. 3rd floor for production, 2nd floor for residential, 1st floor for storage and defense. We'd established gardens on the roof, using soil and seeds acquired through trade, growing supplemental food that reduced our dependence on external supplies. Solar panels installed through a coalition project provided backup power. Water filtration systems ensured we'd have clean water even if municipal supplies failed. We weren't just surviving, we were building something permanent. But permanence attracted attention. Not everyone viewed the coalition positively. Some survivor groups saw it as a threat, a power block that might eventually dominate the entire quarantine zone. Rival coalitions formed, competing for resources and influence. Tensions escalated. The crisis came on day 214, month 7 by my reckoning. A survivor group calling themselves the Restoration Front made contact through formal channels, requesting a meeting to discuss mutual interests. They were a large group, maybe 60 members, occupying a fortified shopping complex on the western edge of the zone. They claimed to represent order, structure, a return to civilized society. They'd established their own internal economy using pre-outbreak currency, maintained a strict organizational hierarchy, and were aggressively recruiting smaller survivor groups to join them. Marcus Wade attended the meeting with 4 coalition representatives. I accompanied him, along with Patrick, for security assessment. We met at a neutral location, a cleared intersection midway between territories, with both sides bringing 5 people and agreeing to keep weapons holstered. The Restoration Front's leader was a man named Harrison Colt, probably mid-50s, dressed in business casual clothing that looked absurdly formal given the circumstances. He had the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, a corporate executive or political figure from before the outbreak. He greeted us with professional courtesy that felt disconnected from reality. "Gentlemen," Harrison began, his voice smooth and practiced, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I'll be direct. The Restoration Front represents the future of this quarantine zone. We have structure, resources, and a vision for rebuilding civilized society. Your coalition has manufacturing capabilities that would be valuable assets to our organization. We're offering you the opportunity to join us, to integrate your operations under Restoration Front administration in exchange for security guarantees and access to our resource networks." Marcus's response was immediate and flat. "We're already organized. We have security, resources, and functional trade relationships. We're not interested in subordinating our independence to your administration." Harrison's smile remained fixed, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I don't think you understand the reality of the situation. The Restoration Front controls significant resources, food production facilities, water treatment capabilities, ammunition manufacturing. Groups that align with us thrive. Groups that refuse," he shrugged eloquently. "They find themselves isolated, unable to trade, vulnerable to the various threats that exist in this zone." It was a threat wrapped in diplomatic language. Join them or face economic warfare and potential violence. Patrick spoke up, his military background evident in his direct approach. "You're describing extortion. Comply or be destroyed. That's not rebuilding civilization. That's establishing a protection racket." Harrison's smile vanished entirely. "Call it what you like. The fact remains, we're offering you a chance to be part of something larger. Refuse, and you'll find yourselves competing with an organization that has resources you can't match. The choice is yours." The meeting ended shortly after. We returned to the factory and convened an emergency coalition council. Representatives from all member groups gathered in the third-floor conference room we'd established for strategic meetings. The debate lasted 4 hours. Some members argued for negotiating with the Restoration Front, finding some accommodation that preserved independence while avoiding conflict. Others insisted that any negotiation would be seen as weakness, that the Front's ultimatum demanded firm rejection. Bear, with his logistics background, laid out the sobering reality that a trade war with the Front would strain our resources severely. They did control significant production capabilities. In the end, the vote was unanimous. The coalition would maintain independence and refuse integration into the Restoration Front. We'd prepare for the consequences. Those consequences came faster than expected. 3 days after the meeting, our supply lines were hit. A coalition convoy carrying food and medical supplies was ambushed 2 miles from the factory. The attackers wore Restoration Front insignia. They didn't kill anyone. They weren't trying to start open warfare yet, but they took the supplies and left a message: "Join us or go hungry." Marcus's response was to organize a retaliatory raid on a Front supply cache. The coalition strike team returned with captured goods and 2 Front prisoners who confirmed that Harrison Colt had ordered the campaign of economic pressure against independent groups. The quarantine zone was spiraling toward civil war. I stood on the factory roof on day 230, looking out over the industrial park that had become our world. Smoke rose from fires in 3 different directions. Gunfire echoed in the distance, brief exchanges that spoke of skirmishes between factions. The infected were still out there, still the primary threat, but increasingly humans were fighting humans over resources and control. Sam joined me on the roof, handing me a bottle of purified water. "Never thought we'd be in the middle of post-apocalyptic politics," he said quietly. "We just wanted to make protective clothing and survive." "We created value," I replied. "Value attracts attention. Attention brings conflict. It's human nature. Even at the end of the world, we find reasons to fight each other instead of focusing on the actual threats. So what do we do?" It was the critical question. The factory was valuable enough that the Restoration Front wanted to control it. We were integrated enough into the coalition that abandoning our partners wasn't an option. We could fight, flee, or find some third path that preserved our operation and our independence. The answer came from Jenny, surprisingly. She'd been quiet during the coalition meetings, focused on her design work, seemingly removed from the political maneuvering. But that evening, she gathered the entire factory workforce, all 32 people who now called this facility home, and made a proposal. "We're manufacturers," she said. "That's our strength. We don't have the most weapons or the most fighters. What we have is the ability to produce gear that everyone needs. The coalition needs us. The front wants us because they recognize our value. Even the military units outside the quarantine zone are trading with us. So we use that. We make ourselves so valuable to everyone that attacking us becomes counterproductive." "How?" Derek asked. "The front doesn't care about trade. They want control. Then we make them care," Jenny replied. "We expand production. We start trading with the front on the same terms we trade with everyone else. We provide their people with protective gear, with equipment they need, at fair rates. We become a neutral resource that serves everyone. If they attack us, they lose access to our products. If we show we're willing to trade fairly with all parties, attacking us damages their own interests." It was risky. Trading with the front meant potentially enabling a group that might eventually destroy the coalition. But it also might diffuse the immediate crisis by demonstrating that we weren't an enemy. We were a resource that benefited everyone. Marcus was skeptical when I presented the proposal. "You're talking about arming our rivals, giving them gear that makes them stronger. I'm talking about preventing a war that would destroy everything we've built," I countered. "The front is powerful enough to sustain a prolonged conflict. We're not. If fighting starts, we might win, or we might lose everything. If we can avoid the fight entirely by demonstrating neutrality, that's the better strategic choice." The Coalition Council voted narrowly in favor. We'd attempt neutral trading, offering our products to all groups at standard rates, refusing to take sides in the political conflicts, positioning the factory as infrastructure rather than a partisan asset. I sent a message to Harrison Colt through formal channels. "The factory is open for trade. Standard rates, same terms offered to all groups. We're neutral manufacturers, not coalition military assets. If you're interested in protecting your people with quality gear, we're prepared to trade." The response came 24 hours later. Harrison Colt himself arrived at the factory with a small delegation, and we conducted negotiations through the secured entrance just as we had with every other group. The man was calculating rather than angry. He recognized the strategic value of what we were offering, access to our products, without the need for costly conflict. We hammered out an agreement. The front would receive manufactured goods at standard coalition rates, would respect the factory's neutrality, and would cease hostile actions against our supply lines. In exchange, we'd produce a quota of items specifically for front use and would maintain strict neutrality in any coalition front conflicts. It wasn't a perfect solution. Some coalition members felt betrayed by our willingness to trade with the enemy. Some front members viewed our neutrality as opportunistic weakness. But the immediate crisis was diffused. The factory continued operating. Production continued expanding. By month 8, we were manufacturing for 5 separate factions, plus independent survivor groups, plus military units at the quarantine perimeter. We'd become essential infrastructure, the Switzerland of the apocalypse, valuable precisely because we didn't take sides. The factory workforce had grown to 45 people. We'd established satellite workshops in 2 coalition-controlled buildings, expanding production capacity. Our product line included 20 different items, ranging from basic protective clothing to specialized tactical gear. We'd trained 30 coalition members in basic sewing and manufacturing skills, spreading knowledge so that production capability wasn't concentrated solely in our facility. Month 9 brought 2 significant developments. First, The quarantine perimeter began to open, limited, controlled openings at specific checkpoints, allowing carefully screened survivor groups to exit the zone after medical examination and decontamination procedures. The military was declaring the outbreak contained, not eliminated but controlled enough that systematic evacuation could begin. Second, we received an offer from the military command. They wanted to establish a formal contract with the factory, commissioning large-scale production of protective gear for military and civilian use, as the zone was cleared and reconstruction began. Real resources, official recognition, integration into the post-outbreak rebuilding efforts. We'd survived. We'd built something that mattered. The factory that had been a refuge in the first hours of the outbreak had become an economic engine that helped hundreds of survivors stay alive. We'd manufactured value when value was measured in protection against teeth and claws instead of profit margins and market share. I stood on the production floor on day 270, watching machines run, watching skilled workers produce garments that would keep people alive, and felt a strange sense of pride. We'd adapted. We'd survived. We'd found purpose in the midst of chaos. Jenny approached, holding a new design, a jacket with even more sophisticated protective features incorporating lessons learned from 9 months of user feedback. "What do you think?" she asked. "Next-generation design. Better mobility, better protection, more modular." I studied the pattern, seeing the evolution from our crude first prototype to this refined engineering. "I think we keep improving," I said. "Keep adapting. Keep manufacturing value." Because that's what we do. We take raw materials and transform them into things that matter. That didn't change when the world ended. It just became more obvious. Outside, the world was slowly rebuilding. Inside, machines hummed with steady purpose. The factory that had manufactured fashion now manufactured survival, and in doing so, had found its truest purpose. This is how civilization rebuilds. One stitch at a time, one trade at a time, one group of survivors deciding that cooperation beats conflict. If this story made you think about what really matters when everything falls apart, hit that subscribe button and share it. Someone else needs to hear how manufacturing, trade, and community can survive even at the end of the world.